Welcome to both sides of the conversation, everybody. Tonight to our Educational Thursday presentations. Tonight we have a remarkable guest coming back again to give our community some great information. Tonight she's going to be talking about home contracts, understanding the contracts. 2 weeks ago, she came in and taught us the baby steps on purchasing a home. Today we have with us special guest, Rhea Cotton. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you so we can jump into tonight's presentation, Understanding Contracts.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone to both sides of the conversation, and thanks for having me back. So as John mentioned 2 weeks ago, we talked about the home buying process, and today we're going to dive a bit deeper into purchase contracts. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so just to tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Rhea Cotton. I'm the broker owner of Cotton Realty, and we are a virtual team, meaning that all of our agents work in various different counties throughout Northern California, soon to expand to Southern California, in order to keep up with the market and exchange information on how to best service our clients. As we know, in purchasing homes, we tend to, we're a commuter town. We commute all across the Bay Area for home ownership and for work. And so my team is spread throughout the Bay Area to provide the best service to our clients. And I'll just share my team with you guys. So we have Lanice Span, who is based out of the Solano County area, but we as a team, we cover the entire Bay Area, so we're not restricted to any area within Northern California, or California, I should say. We have Claudia Schultz, who is also bilingual. She speaks Spanish. Serena Kelly, which is in the East Contra Costa County area. Miana Epps, who is in the West Contra Costa County area, and myself, which I focus on Berkeley, San Francisco, and the surrounding Bay Area cities. We have access to provide home ownership throughout Northern California, and so we're not limited in the properties that we can show you guys if you guys are looking at 2 different counties or maybe 2 different neighborhoods. So we're going to dive into the purchase contract. So we talked about home ownership and the process, kind of like an A to Z process of what to expect. So another important part of home ownership is getting an idea of your purchase agreement and what you're signing. Initially, when you're out looking at properties, it can be a very exciting experience to look at properties. You're putting in lots of offers and sometimes even in a bidding war, but when it's time to actually have your offer accepted, you don't want that to be the time where you're looking at the contract, like, what did I sign up for and what am I obligated to do in this transaction? So the best thing to do is, in addition to this video, is sit with your real estate professional and go over what the terms are. Because although we'll be going over the contract, the terms in the contract will change based on the offer that you present for your property. Okay, so there are some disclosures that are accompanied with the purchase contract, and we're just going to touch on them. The first disclosure is the disclosure regarding real estate agent relationship. And so this disclosure is important for you guys to read over because it tells you what the seller's agent's responsibility is in the transaction. It tells you what, if you're purchasing a house, it tells you what your buyer's agent their responsibility is in the transaction, and it also tells you what the responsibilities are for someone that is representing both the buyer and the seller in one transaction, and that is possible and it is legal to represent both the buyer and the seller. Also, it goes over the seller and buyer responsibilities within the transaction. So there's tons of disclosures that are that go throughout the transaction. Be sure to read all of them because it's your responsibility to do your due diligence before signing. Next, we have the Fair Housing and Discrimination Advisory forms. So this was a form that actually just started generating automatically through the California Association of Realtors with our purchase agreements. And I am glad that they have included it. It's just a reminder that about equal housing and that we should not, the law just prohibits discrimination. And so, unfortunately, in these times, we have to be reminded of that. But it is also in writing a reminder about what is discrimination when it comes to housing and what is fair housing when you are looking at selling or buying a property. Okay. And as you can see, it's signed by the buyer and the seller. So they are aware of what the law is. Next, we have the possible representation of more than one buyer or seller disclosure and consent. So this basically states that a real estate broker can work with multiple buyers. So although you may sign a buyer's representation agreement, um, they can represent yourself as well as other buyers. And it's possible that your buyer's agent could represent more than one buyer on a property. So you may be applying, you may be putting in an offer on a property, and that agent can also put in an offer for another buyer on that same property. Multiple sellers. So a broker can list more than one home at a time. And again, there can be dual agency. So dual agency is when a broker is representing both the seller and the buyer. Another important note is that dual agency is within the same broker. So keep in mind that dual agency can be if you have Cotton Realty and I'm representing the buyer and one of my agents are representing the seller, that's still dual agency because at the end of the day, both of us report back to me as the broker owner of the company. So that is considered dual agency. So you may have an institution that is under one branch, but both agents are representing two different people. That is still considered a dual agency because if there's any conflict, they're reporting to the same broker. Now, I know before we move on, a lot of the questions that I get is it hard to do a dual agency? So it can get tricky, and it's best basically to speak with your buyer or speak with your buyer's agent, or if you're selling a house, speak with your listing agent and let them know up front before you go into a transaction if you have any issues with that, and that that needs to be specified in the agreement that you have before you go into the transaction. I'm actually doing a dual agency right now between the buyer and the seller. They basically both decided that they wanted me to represent them on both sides to basically explain paperwork, explain the process, and then when it comes to value, I give them both the same information regarding market value, and then they make their best decision based on the information provided. So I have successfully done dual agency, and it works when you're fair on both sides and you're a fair person and you communicate well. And so I think that if you have someone representing you that has a good level of communication, then all parties will be satisfied. Next is the wire fraud and electronic funds disclosure, disclosure or advisory. So most times when we talked about putting in an escrow money deposit when your offer is accepted, and that will sometimes be transferred to an escrow company via a wire transfer. And you'll receive an email that has wire instructions that you'll use in order to wire your money to the escrow company. And it's always advised to actually pick up the phone, call the title and escrow company and confirm their wire instructions with them by phone before you send it by email to basically avoid any fraud. Now we're going to get into the actual residential purchase agreement. So this is the California Residential Purchase Agreement and Joint Escrow Instructions, last revised December 2018. That date is important because we like to keep our contracts updated. There's always information that the California Association of Realtors will provide that pertains to our transactions that are important. I have seen maybe just once or twice a contract come over, like written in ink, and it was an old contract, and it definitely took out some of the important parts that pertain to today's transactions. So it's very important that you're signing an updated contract. So starting with the top of the contract, I'm not going to go line by line. I'm just going to touch on the important parts of this contract. Okay. So and then if there's any questions that you have, please put them in the chat, and I believe we will read through the chat after the end of the presentation. Okay. So starting off with the date prepared. So of course, if we're preparing the contract today, we will put today's date. And then it starts off with the basics, your information, the property that you're putting in an offer on, and then the parcel number, which is tied to the tax records. And so one thing as a real estate professional that I am charged to do is make sure that the parcel number matches the property on the tax records, and that we are not purchasing a property that is not represented. Because if your parcel number is wrong, then it's like, okay, what are you in contract for? Are you in contract for the parcel number that's tied to X address, or are you tied to Z address that's tied to X parcel number? So those two things are important. Then right here, you'll have the purchase price. So you'll enter the purchase price here. Remember, I mentioned in the last presentation that everything is negotiable. So this is the start of your offer. And then you have your close of escrow. So your close of escrow can occur on a particular specific date or a certain amount of days after acceptance. Okay, so typically it's usually 21 to 30 days after acceptance for your contract. So it's very important to pay attention to that, because if you put 21 to 30, if you put 21 days and then your lender says that they can't close in 21 days, it's going to take them 30, then you have an issue. So it's very important to keep your lender also in the loop when you're writing these contracts. Okay, so the next one, this is where you'll find if you have a dual agency, if the broker is representing both you and the seller, or vice versa. And so right here, it says the seller brokerage firm. So that goes there. And then the buyer's brokerage firm, and that goes there. And then we put the license numbers. So if I'm writing an offer with an agent outside of my brokerage, I'll always verify that their license is active and they can actually do business with me. So I'll check with the Department of Real Estate for their license number. And then if their brokerage number is blank, I'll go and look up what their who their broker is. Okay. Next is the financial terms. Okay, so typically with the financial terms, it starts with the initial deposit. So the initial deposit is usually about 3% of the purchase price, and you would put that amount right here. Now, it's very important to look at that part, because in the beginning of the beginning of the transaction, your agent may have told you, hey, we're going to put in 1,000, 5,000 as the initial deposit. So you want to make sure the number that you guys agreed upon is the number that is placed on this line, because you will be responsible to getting that money to the escrow company should your offer be accepted. Okay, so so make sure you pay attention to that. Also, it says here that it has to be delivered within 3 business days. So it's important too that you know that your funds can be delivered within 3 days. In our previous presentation, I mentioned that sometimes your escrow money deposit will come from a 401k or retirement fund. It takes some time to withdraw that money from your 401k account. Sometimes it might take 5 to 7 days. So that is important to keep in mind when you are committing to the 3 days, because it says within 3 business days after acceptance, and then you would put in the or if you can't meet that timeline. Okay. Increased deposit. You may have throughout the transaction agreed with the seller to increase your deposit by a certain amount through a certain amount of days throughout the transaction. For your first time home buyer, that's not likely. So you may not have to pay attention to that line. And then we have the all cash offer. So this box is checked if there is no loan tied to your contract. So it says no loan is needed to purchase the property. This offer is not contingent on a buyer obtaining a loan. And then written verification of sufficient funds to close this transaction is attached to the offer or will be delivered within 3 days after acceptance. So basically for all cash offers, you are providing proof of funds with your offer, okay? So the next section is loans. So right here, you would put your first loan. So you're looking at the purchase price that is at the top, and then you have your down payment, your escrow money deposit, and then you have your down payment and closing costs. So it's important to know what your down payment and your closing costs are, as well as your loan amount. And so I would advise when you get pre-approved to go over with your lender the loan estimate that shows how much you're looking to come in at the end of the transaction with their down payment and your closing costs, minus your escrow money deposit. So that escrow money deposit was your good faith, but it is deducted from the balance of your down payment and your closing costs at the end of the transaction. So you want to know what all those numbers are before you go into contract. Okay. Also, you will be stating if this loan will be conventional or FHA VA. So FHA is the government loan that many people like to get because of the credit score flexibility as well as the minimal down payment of 3.5%. There are a lot of conventional products right now that have 3 or 5% down that are pretty competitive with the FHA government financing. And then you have your VA, which is your veterans financing for our vets. And then there's the option for seller financing. And so seller financing is if you're purchasing a property and the seller is carrying the note, you're actually paying the seller. They're the lender in the transaction. And then not used often, assumed financing. There's not a lot of lenders that will assume the loan from the seller. So basically you're taking over the loan of the seller and assuming the financing that they previously had. And then also it says if the loan shall be fixed and what the interest rate should not exceed. So this is important because let's say, I mean, it's not likely, but let's say you put in that you were approved at a 3% interest rate, and for some reason the rate goes up to 4%, and that rate from 3 to 4% prevents you from being qualified. So this is telling the seller what the interest rate is on your pre-approval and what it cannot exceed. Because if it does exceed it, then you will no longer be qualified for the loan. And most times your loan is locked in, your loan interest rate is locked in after the offer is accepted. Some lenders have a lock and shop program where you lock in your loan at pre-approval and then you go and shop and that rate is guaranteed. But then there's other lenders that you have to basically lock in the rate after the contract has been accepted. And then you want to communicate with the lender and make sure they locked it after the contract is accepted. So then we have a second loan. So that could be if you're getting down payment assistance in the form of a loan that is not payable or due until you sell or refinance the home. They have other stipulations here for your FHA loans and what you need to deliver after the FHA loan, after the purchase contract is accepted, if you have the FHA loan. And then if you have any additional financing terms, special programs that you're using that's built into your financing, that would actually go into this section, okay? And then you have your balance of down payment or purchase price. So that's automatically calculated. And then your total purchase price is automatically calculated on your contract. Okay, moving on to page 2. So page 2 starts off with verification of down payment and closing cost. So that is your proof of funds. So if you're getting a gift, you need to show some type of gift letter, or that you have money in your savings or checking account. You're getting down payment assistance. You have money coming from a retirement account. All of that is basically provided as an attachment to your purchase contract. And then you can put verification attached, or as you see here, it defaults to 3 business days, or 3 calendar days, 3 calendar days after acceptance. So it is recommended that you basically, you're competing against other people. And so you want your package to be as complete as possible. So it is recommended that you have your verification attached versus providing it after your offer is accepted. In our last presentation, we talked about contingencies and how contingencies protect our escrow money deposit. So right here, you have how many days you have to actually complete your appraisal. So have the appraisal ordered by your lender, have the appraisal actually back to the lender and to you to get the final actual market value of the home. So the contract defaults to 17 days after acceptance to get your appraisal. So this may change to make your offer more competitive. So if your lender says, I can get an appraisal back in 2 weeks, your realtor may change the 17 to 14. So make sure you look at that and you're talking to your lender, everybody's on the same page. Next is your loan application. So it says here, within 3 days after acceptance, buyer shall deliver to the seller a letter from the buyer's lender. So that's your pre-approval letter, which you want to, again, to make your offer more competitive, have that letter attached to your offer. And you would click this box right here, letter attached. Now, once you are in contract, you do have a loan contingency. So a lot of people say, okay, why do I need a loan contingency? I have my loan approval. Well, your loan still has to go through underwriting, and there may be other conditions to closing your loan that is requested from you by the underwriter. So right here, it says that you have 21 days to remove your loan contingency. Again, this may change to 17. So definitely, if you are, let's say, closing in 21 days, your loan contingency removal would be less than that. Then you have this puppy right here, which is no loan contingency. So if this is marked, that means that you are stating that if anything happens, something happens with your employment, your credit, your cash for the transaction, that you are still liable to close on this loan or be subject to losing your escrow money deposit if this box is checked. Okay, some people will, if they have a very low debt to income ratio, which is your income versus how much you have in your credit report debt and your mortgage with taxes and insurance, is very low, and you know that there's nothing that could stop you from getting this property. There are some transactions that will remove these contingencies, and then that would make their offer a little more competitive than yours if it's marked. Let's see. The next section we'll just talk about, these are addendums and advisories. So sometimes there's special circumstances within your transaction that will require other advisories or addendums. This would be right in here. And then this is automatically populated, the buyer's inspection advisory. So I'll have that, we'll go over it in a minute. So some of them are probate advisory. So if the property is in probate that you're purchasing, there's an advisory for that. Trust. If you're purchasing a short sale, REO advisory is if you're purchasing a foreclosed property. And then if there are other terms that you are requesting out of the transaction, you would have this section right here to make your to specify other terms. Okay. Allocation of cost is the next section. Allocation of cost is just basically saying who's paying for what. Okay. And so this will vary based on the transaction, the property, the county, the city. So your real estate professional will go over these if they need to be marked, okay? One to pay special attention to, for instance, in the city of Oakland, is the city transfer tax. So there are some counties that have cities that do not have a city transfer tax. And then there's other counties like Alameda County that has Oakland that has one of the highest transfer taxes. And it could mean a difference of a couple of thousand, 3 to 4,000 or more dollars in your closing cost. So if you were originally, let's say you originally got a pre-approval and you told your lender, oh, I'm buying in Contra Costa County, and you're buying in a county that doesn't have city transfer tax. Well, you skipped over to Oakland, decided to buy in Oakland, and now your closing costs are $3,000 or $4,000 more because it is in the city of Oakland. So we have a schedule that we use on who takes care of what. Again, everything is negotiable. So although like in Oakland, it's usually split between the buyer and seller, some people, to make their offer more competitive, will take on the full city transfer tax and pay for it in its entirety and not split it with the seller to make their offer more competitive. Other things you have to say who pays for what is the homeowners association transfer fee, doc preparation. It says seller shall pay HOA fees for preparing documents required to be delivered. Other things like your home warranty. So if you're getting a home warranty plan on the appliances and so forth on your property, then it says who pays for what on that. And it talks about coverages. If you are waiving your home warranty, then they have a box for that. So as you can see, the purchase contract covers a lot of information, and the purchase process can be very stressful. So that's why it's so important that we're going over this now, because it's definitely going to be helpful for you in the future. Next, we have a section that goes over items included in the sale. So this is important because although the stove and the refrigerator and the washer and dryer are sitting nice and pretty in the property, the seller may be planning to take those items with them. So, so you would have to mark that there. And if you have any other items that you see in the property that you wouldn't want them to take, like maybe their drapes are just beautiful and you want to keep them, then you'd add the items here. This section, leased or lien items and systems, talks about things that may be leased or lien on the property, items excluded from the sale. You may want them to remove some things from the property and make sure that it's gone. Maybe they have a really ugly shed in the backyard that you do not want to deal with tearing down. You can basically specify that, okay? Closing and possession. So buyer intends or does not intend to occupy the property as buyer's primary residence. So if you are buying this as your primary residence, then that should be left blank. It should not, and then based on your lender, there's various different times that you can occupy the property. So let's say seller occupied or vacant property, possession to be delivered by buyer at 6 p.m. on the date of close of escrow. But let's say that your seller asked for a rent back, and that is basically another addendum to the contract that's stating that they maybe need a couple of weeks or a couple of days to move out of the property after you close escrow, which happens often because sometimes the seller's funds for moving or for buying their next property is tied up into this property, so they can't really make any moves until after the close of escrow. Unless the property is already vacant, you need to check with your lender to see how long can you go with the seller being in the property before you have to occupy it for it to be considered your primary residence. So then that goes into this section, seller remaining in possession after close of escrow. I kind of already touched on that. If you're buying an investment property or I would say a single family residence, you have your tenant occupied property and it has information regarding tenants to remain in possession or tenants to vacate. If you're purchasing a 2 to 4 unit property, there is actually a separate purchase agreement in addition to outside of this one, if you're buying a primary residence, 2 to 4 units. So you're buying a 2 to 4 unit property, but you're still residing in it. There's another contract for that. Okay, so then we go into statutory and other disclosures. So you'll get, after you are in contract, you'll get a ton of disclosures to sign and read over. And this section just basically goes over some of those disclosures and what they are. Okay, so like natural and environmental hazard disclosures and booklets. It talks about if you're in a flood zone, that sort of thing, very high fire hazard area. So this section basically goes over what disclosures that you need to be aware of that will be coming your way in more detail. Condominium plan development disclosures. So this section talks about how many days that the seller has to get you the HOA documents, because you need the homeowners association documents. So you need to know if there are restrictions on renting out your house in the future. There's restrictions on what size animals you can have if you're purchasing a condo. What you can do to the home, if there's restrictions on you adding on to the home, all of that you need to read and review. So it's important that the seller get those documents to you in a timely fashion if they haven't already provided them prior to the contract. Okay, so condition of property, it says unless otherwise agreed in writing, the property is sold as is in its present physical condition. So in our presentation a couple of weeks ago, we talked about requests for repairs and negotiations and inspection contingencies. And so all of that is negotiated, but it is implied when you go in the contract that you're purchasing it in its present condition. It talks about title investing. So a real estate professional, we cannot give you advice when it comes to taxes or how to hold title, but it gives you some parameters on what to do to investigate how to hold title. Okay, this next section continues with contingencies. We talked earlier about appraisal and loan contingencies on the contract. This is the more contingencies. So the seller has 7 days after acceptance to deliver whatever reports and disclosures they have that they have on hand about the property. They're required to present that to you. And then also you have your own investigations. And so right here it says it's defaulted to 17 days. So you have 17 days if you're doing home, roof, pest. You're looking at you're getting an arborist to check how the roots are growing in the underneath the house, all of that. You're given a time frame of how long you can do that. And so it could be 17 days, it could be longer, it could be shorter, based on the property and the competitiveness. Now this right here says that you're removing all the contingencies with the offer. So that is a very dangerous move, especially as a first-time home buyer. And I know it gets tough because you're trying to be as competitive as possible in this market, but you have to be very careful in what you're getting into and how much information, and it's really based on how much information is provided by the seller up front versus what you're going into when you're going into the unknown of buying this property, one of the biggest investments of your life, and you may have to invest even more after the sale. So this goes next into ways of which the seller has the right to cancel. Most times it's basically based on the buyer not performing as they had agreed on, and you'll receive a notice to buyer to perform if you're not providing or you're not basically removing your contingencies or closing the deal as you had planned. So this section right here goes into final verification of condition of property. This is basically saying that you will review the property again before you close escrow, but at this point, you've already removed your contingencies for inspection. So this is not a negotiating point. This is basically making sure that the property is left in the condition of what you saw it in its prior. Or if you did have a request for repair and they did some repairs, this is the time where you're confirming that the repairs are complete. And then it talks about repairs. It talks about prorations of property taxes. So your based on when you close escrow, there will be a proration of the taxes for when you have to pay them next. So that is all drawn out for you in your closing statement that you'll read over, that the title and escrow company will provide to you. Broker's compensation. So in most all transactions, you'll see that the broker's compensation of both the seller and the buyer will come from the seller of the transaction. So the seller and buyer will be paid out of the net proceeds of the seller. There are other contracts that go into place that would change those agreements. So basically, it gives you an idea of the scope of duty of the buyer and seller and all parties involved. Representative capacity. We'll go over that in a minute, but sometimes individuals are represented by other parties, or you may be purchasing as like an LLC or a trust. So that talks about that. Joint escrow instructions and escrow holders. So it's important that you get your purchase agreement and any counter offers, anything that's pertinent to the agreement of the transaction, to the escrow holder within 3 days after acceptance, unless something else is written in this blank space. This next section talks about liquidated damages, a forfeiture of your escrow money deposit, and basically they really advise that you go through arbitration or mediation before you look at suing an opposite party. So this section goes into more information about that, how a mediator can be provided, and so forth. It also talks about if you have not met your obligations and your escrow money deposit is more than 3%, that the seller should hold on to no more than 3% and give you the balance. Just because they have taken that money away, that doesn't mean that you can't go to mediation, arbitration, and contest it, and then if need be, go through a legal system to decide if they were rightfully taking those funds. The next goes into a lot of definitions. So they're trying to make sure in the next few pages of this contract that you are aware of terms and definitions as it relates to the contract. And if there's something that you do not understand, some people decide to have an attorney look over their contract. I never stop anybody from doing that, but the attorney cannot always understand the terms. And I've experienced this firsthand, where I had an attorney involved in the sale of a property, and I had to basically explain some of the real estate terminology as it relates to real estate that meant something totally different from him in the legal realm, his legal world. Okay, so this is important, expiration of offer. So some people will ask, when can I put in two offers in at the same time? And my answer is no. But you can change how long the seller has to review your offer. So if you put in an offer on Monday, you can say that you want them to respond to you by Tuesday, because if they don't respond to you or accept your offer, you want to move on to another property where offers are due on Thursday. So this is the section where you would put the expiration date of the offer. Next is one or more buyers is signing in this agreement in representative capacity, and not for himself or as an individual. So once you check this box, another contract will be, or addendum will be generated that says who you're signing on behalf of, or if you're signing on behalf of, you're the executor of a trust. That's an additional document that would need to be provided to the seller. And then your name goes here. Additional signature addendum attached. So this additional signature is if there is more than 2 people on the transaction. So you may have 4 people in the transaction, and then you have to basically click that box, and then it generates for your real estate professional an additional form so that the additional people in your contract can also state that they've seen the contract and they're in agreement of all the terms. So the exciting part. So at the end of the contract, once you basically submit the offer, you want to see that the offer is accepted. So it says acceptance of offer. The sellers would sign here. If they are actually signing like on behalf of a trust, they would mark this box to show, and they may have to provide additional documentation to show that they have the right to sell the property to the, and they provide that to the title company. Now, if this box is checked, it says seller's acceptance is subject to attached counteroffer. That means that you are in the negotiation point at this point. So your offer is accepted with some terms, okay? If you don't agree to those terms, you are not obligated to go forward with the transaction at that point because they presented you with a counteroffer. Okay, so then from there, they present to you the acceptance, you initial stating that you've received the acceptance and that there is no other counter offers if there isn't. And then this is where your brokers are signing their information. So buyer's broker, it has the license information, address, phone number, contact information of the listing agent, contact information of the title and escrow company. And this basically is, it says the presentation of offer. So seller's broker presented this offer to the seller on XYZ date. Rejection of offer. So this is if your offer is rejected, no counter offer is being made. This offer was rejected by seller on XYZ date. If you feel like there is something that is not going on right in the transaction and you just get a phone call and say the offer was declined, but you feel like it wasn't really, or you have some issues of if the listing agent really presented your offer to the seller, well, this is your proof right here. Rejection of offer would be initialed by the seller here. Okay. So that is the 10 pages of the purchase agreement. There is another disclosure that comes with the purchase agreement, which is the buyer's inspection advisory. So it tells you all of the things that you should do to investigate the property, and it is your responsibility to do your own due diligence. If you decide not to, that is basically on you. The brokers, as a broker or real estate professional, we can refer you to like a home inspector, roof pest inspector, but we are not responsible for their performance. So you can actually investigate and pick your own prior to going into contract. And then this is the California Consumer Privacy Act, just telling you about how portions of your information are confidential and cannot be shared with other parties. So this goes over your privacy. And that basically concludes our segment going over the purchase agreement.
Cool. Wonderful job, Rhea. Definitely the information was really informative, easy to understand, but definitely for our people that's out there trying to purchase a home or already going through the process. As you can see, that contract information is long, and it was just beautiful that Rhea was able to point out some of the real important areas that need to be checked. So I hope that you guys receive that information. Rhea, could you go ahead and just give everybody your social media handles and how to get a hold of you verbally, just so that people can reach out to you when we replay and cycle it through the show. And then Asia, we'll look and see if we had any comments in the group that we need to answer.
Okay, great. So yes, again, my name is Rhea Cotton, broker owner of Cotton Realty. My website is riacotton.com, riacotton.com. My company website is cotton-realty.com. I can be found on Facebook under the Fabric of Real Estate, as well as Instagram, the Fabric of Real Estate, and on LinkedIn, I'm under Rhea Cotton. So there you have it. My phone number is 510-385-0409. You can call me, you can text me. I will answer. So some people will see my information and will call, and I will respond. So that is my direct line. So you'll reach me live and in person.
All right, Asia, do we have any comments in the group?
Well, actually, Rhea, can I ask you a question? I had an experience where when I bought my first house, when you talk about dual, like a dual agent that represents the buyer and the seller, the home we bought, we thought it was easy and went with the seller's agent, and
Right.
it got to the point where it felt like the seller's agent really wasn't representing us.
Right.
It was like a family friend. There were things that started not to feel uncomfortable. Is there anything that you can do once you kind of enter into something, or are you just kind of stuck and you just have to write it through?
No, well, it depends on where you are in the process of the contract. But yeah, even if you sign a buyer's representation agreement and it says, okay, I'm gonna be your buyer's agent for 3 months, you can you can basically cancel that at any time. And if both parties are agreeing in writing, you have that, and then you move on. So, so dual agency is a very sticky situation, and a lot of people think, oh, I'm gonna skip my buyer's agent and go straight to the listing agent because I'll get a deal. But you also have to know the terms of which they are selling the property. For instance, I may say that I'm listing a property for someone. My fee is 6%. So I have 3% that goes to myself and 3% that goes to the buyer's agent. But I can also make an agreement with a listing agent that says if I procure the buyer while I'm selling your house, then I will decrease my fee from 6% to 4%. So, so you have to be aware of all those caveats. So, so yeah, it's a very sticky situation, and if you don't have a relationship and a trust built, and you're just walking into a house and you feel like you won't, I definitely recommend to get a buyer's agent, even if sometimes I'm actually listing a house. So most times when I do dual agency, all parties know each other for the most part. So if I am actually listing a house and a buyer comes to me and they've already established a relationship with a buyer's agent, I recommend that they use that buyer's agent to go forward with a transaction, because I don't want to make anyone personally, don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable over a check.
And then how, as a buyer, because again, when we went out, we just kind of we were just looking at places, and then it just happened upon. What, as a buyer, should I be looking for a buyer's agent? Because it seems like, well, I should just be able to go look at a house and say, okay, this is great, but you know what? In reality, based on your presentation, I really do need somebody that's going to represent me. So,
Right.
what should I be looking for, and how does your services help me?
Good question. So the easiest way, and I've said this in a lot of presentations, is does your buyer's agent have a home buyer's consultation where they're preparing you for the process? And can they explain the purchase agreement? So the easiest way to figure out if you're working with the buyer's agent that you should be working with is if they can explain to you the contract that we just went over. If they can't explain to you the contract, which is basically your fate at the end of the day, then that's a red flag. So I would say when you're looking to work with a buyer's agent, you want somebody that can negotiate on your behalf. So it's not just being a buyer's agent isn't just walking somebody in the house and you saying, I like it, and writing an offer. They have to basically let you know what you need to do to prepare, what that you need to do inspections, that if you have a request for repair, that your buyer's agent is knowledgeable enough and strong enough and confident enough to negotiate your wants and needs with the listing agent as far as they can. Because believe me, in some markets, it's very competitive. There's only so much you can do. But you need a buyer's agent that's going to be able to negotiate on your behalf and not shy. So a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do real estate, it's so easy, until you get into contracts and liability and lawsuits. So yeah, it takes a lot. And so I would say they have a buyer's consultation with you. They can explain to you the purchase agreement, and they have some knowledge over the lending. So the lending piece is very important. I've had a lot of clients that have come into lenders that don't fully explain the process to them or the loan to them, and it gets them in a lot of trouble at the end of the transaction. And so a buyer's agent also needs to know what type of loan you're getting and what type of loan options are out there for you, because you might have to get really creative in the type of loan that you need for your specific situation. Like maybe you qualify for down payment assistance, maybe you don't, maybe that's not a good thing for you. So also they need to have some type of knowledge of what type of lender you should be working with at the same time. And that's also good with the home buying consultation with a real estate agent. I always request that people talk to me before they talk to a lender if I catch them in time. Because if you may walk into a bank that doesn't offer down payment assistance, and they tell you there's no down payment assistance programs available because they don't offer it. That's why it's not available. So, but if you would have came to me first, I would have said, this person offers this person offers this, and this person offers this. Depending on which way you want to go in the transaction, this is who we need to work with.
Okay. And can I ask another question?
Sure.
So I know you said, like going through the contract, you were mentioning about, say, things that are actually going to be left at the home. Say, okay, the appliances, right? That's going to be part of the deal. What happens if it's missing?
That happens.
My refrigerator, the stove is supposed to be there, and then we move in and it's gone. Is that something that I'm out, I'm out of luck, or do I have to go through XYZ? What happens with that kind of stuff?
Right. So that's when the verification of property that you do, the final walkthrough, is important to do. And then it may be an issue of mediation. So we always like to go mediation before legal, because, you're going to spend more money on an attorney than a refrigerator, right? And so then it goes through the arbitration process, or basically the real estate agents speaking with one another. I haven't had it personally, but I did have a broker recently tell me that it wasn't missing, but the refrigerator that they saw when they purchased the house, they switched it out for a different refrigerator. So it wasn't what they had originally.
I had someone where the appliances were gone.
They were gone.
Right. And so it was like, no, it was part of the deal. So I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. And then and I know maybe this is more on the home buying, but with contracts and things, should someone be looking at somebody that's maybe a specialist in the area? I know you have different people in different areas. Should I really be looking for somebody in my particular area, so that they know and really know the market, and so when they see how much something is, that it really is that amount, or just speak with anyone?
Right. So you want to work with somebody that is familiar with the market and knows how to analyze the market. So I can go to Stockton and analyze the market. Again, though, I have 10 years of mortgage experience. I've worked in an appraisal department, supporting an appraisal department, underwriting and origination. I've analyzed comps. So someone can go into a different area and still represent you if they know how to analyze the market properly. Okay, so what they can't probably tell you is if the school that's near the house has the best teachers, or But then they might not even have children. So I would say if you work with an agent that is in an area where they're not usually in business with, they need to be able to professionally analyze the market of what you're purchasing. But it's possible that they can represent you and not be from the area.
And I think that's about it for the comments that I have, John, or that I see.
All right, cool. I looked in the chat. I don't see any other questions. Again, an amazing presentation, Rhea. I think you covered a lot of the questions that people might have had. So just want to thank you again. And you kind of walked us into our next upcoming in the future presentation. We're going to have Monty Maxwell come on, and he's actually a lender, and he's going to talk about the different programs that they have, FHA loans, on the funding side. So that's going to be an upcoming thing here in the future. Looking forward to having that. And I know he works well with you. And again, that's what it's all about: networking, educating the people, giving them information. And I just want to appreciate you and thank you again for coming on, doing a amazing presentation, and just having everything intentional and having everything really informative and very transparent information there. So thank you very much, Rhea, for coming on. At this point, we are going to be getting ready to end this tonight. Tonight, our co-founder, Rico Hamilton, is not on tonight. He's dealing with a family emergency. Please, you guys, send your prayers out there for the brother. Y'all know how you care about the community. You know how you care about everybody. And when we have family emergencies and things happen, we definitely want our community to pray for him and his family. And with that being said, I'm John Henry, the co-founder of Both Sides of Conversation. This was our Thursday night educational presentation with Rhea Cotton, understanding the contract and the home buying process. This Sunday, we will be having our Sunday live webinar conversation. We will be talking about all of the voters, propositions, the pros and cons of these different bills that's being up. We're going to be talking about the our electoral people, and we might have an amazing guest speaker coming on as well. So looking forward to that. And then we'll be jumping after that into our Hidden Gem segment on Tuesday. And we still are looking for panelists. So if you have some information about the voting different propositions and you want to become a panelist, please reach out to us at bothsidesoftheconversation@gmail.com, and we'll be reaching out to you to get you on this Sunday to really educate our community about the different propositions and how they affect us, the pros and cons. It's good to have that insight from others as well. With that being said, we're going to end tonight's segment. Thank you guys for all watching. I hope the information was informative and all that you need. And if you don't, please reach out to Rhea. She's always available, on time, professional, and she handles her business. So please reach out to her to get all your home buying information. If you're looking to buy or you're looking to sell, definitely Rhea is where you want to stop at and have her represent you. So thank you again, Rhea. Thank you for everybody watching tonight. We'll see you guys on Sunday.